Welcome back to New York Wedding Jam, the podcast for modern couples. I'm your host, Jason Alisea, and I'm joined by my co-host, Martine Darniak. Hi, Martine.
Hey Jason, how's it going?
Well, it's good. I had my intro go really well. Did you hear that?
I did. And while I am very thankful for the nice polished version,
Oh
I
yes,
will miss the giggles
yes,
from the previous outtakes.
yes. Well, it took me about 15 episodes to now. We are in episode 15. Yes, to get this
Amazing.
right. Right. So, how's your week been?
It's been an eventful few days here in the New York region. We're talking about the eclipse and an earthquake. The earthquake was definitely, I'd never been in one before.
So where were you for this earthquake?
I was in my office. I'm actually sitting in
Okay.
the exact same spot that I was in when the earthquake happened. But at first I just thought, like, cuz I'm not on like a super high floor or anything. Like, I'm on the third floor. But the sometimes it gets windy up here. So I just figured it was the wind, and then I realized that no, like the mirrors and the walls were also shaking, as was everything on my desk, and I was like, that can't just be the wind. But it took me a second to process it. And here's my question. You know how, like, in all like the earthquake prep, whenever you see like movies or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
they always kind of tell you that you need to just like get under something, like whether it's like a doorway or like under a table if an earthquake hits.
Yeah.
Who has time for that? This is my real question. Like, legitimately, by the time I had processed what was happening, it was over.
Okay.
So like, who, like, is that a real thing? Like, people are supposed to, like, or is this really about the aftershocks after the initial one hits? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Okay. So I think that the earthquake that we experienced was probably very short compared to ones that they have around the world, or like more serious ones.
Got it. Got
I
it.
think for me, I don't know about you, but my experience, this was like a 15-second rumble or 20-second rumble, right?
Yeah. It was less than 30 seconds for sure.
I'm not sure if they all last that short or if they usually last longer, like a few minutes. But I think number one, on the East Coast here, we're not ready for that. So first of all,
No.
processing it is totally acceptable. Like, what the hell's going on? What is going on? What is this?
Right.
I hear a lot of people thought it was their neighbor. They started banging on the ceiling with a broom. Like a lot of things, everything else, but the earthquake.
Right.
So I also think, like, yeah, we're not used to processing that information. California people probably rush right to the doorway out of habit since they've been children.
Right.
And I also think that this was like low intensity.
Got it.
So, like maybe a train. A lot of people thought the train was going by.
I heard that one. I've heard the
So,
train was going by. I've heard lots of other things, but it was so interesting to me because, like, we had all kinds of excuses about what was happening. I heard somebody thought like a truck had run into their house, like
right, right.
a
New Yorkers,
plane.
New Yorkers are always thinking like some tragedy has happened.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
Yeah,
it's Mother Earth just doing her thing.
so I mean, it was kind of random, but thankfully everybody was okay. It was low intensity, but it was definitely made for an interesting day. And I did also feel the aftershock on the same day,
Yes.
which
So like
which
at
not
six, like
everybody
six
did.
thirty. Yeah.
Yeah, not everybody did, but I definitely did also feel the aftershock. So,
I did too at 6:30 in my home. So that was interesting. But now, how about the eclipse? Did you have the glasses? Did you do the whole thing?
I did not. I did not. Although I think eclipses are really cool. But I missed this one. And that's okay. I'm okay with it. I will hopefully be around for the next one.
2044, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I have to admit I was looking forward to it, and when it happened, I was on the roof of my building, and it wasn't it wasn't so spectacular. I wasn't awed. I mean, it was beautiful. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I was watching like the first 30 minutes of it in my office and watching it online.
Right.
which I thought was a better representation because it's just you were so close when you're on the roof of a building with the glasses. The sun was the size of a dime in the sky. It was so
Right.
small.
Right.
So, but I did see it. It was cool, but I wasn't like blown away.
Yeah, I think when I was a kid and we saw them, so like whatever one happened when I was like real young.
Yeah,
I can't remember what year this is, but it was fun, right? Like, you see like the sunspots moving and you kind of get the paper out and you do the whole thing. And I mean, my niece was super excited about her eclipse yesterday, and she called me afterwards to tell me it was really cool. So I don't know if there's just kind of like this joy of it being like a thing you've never seen before
right.
that also might be part of it, or not that I know a lot of adults who got into it as well, but the joy that I've had from it in the past definitely missed this time. But it's not. I don't think that's the eclipse's fault. That just might be our jaded adult selves.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. I heard a weatherman talking about aliens and like the purpose of our being here. It was like he was getting kind of religious, but also like UFO too. And I was like, dude, it's just like it's awesome to look at. I get it, but it's just
It's also a natural phenomenon.
It's not even weather related, so I don't know why the weather guy's commenting on it. We predicted it with 100% accuracy. It's not something that the weatherman can do.
And you can do that with 100% accuracy
Right.
years in advance.
Exactly. Right.
So, like, it's kind of timed, like we know it's coming. But anyway, people, like if you've had an experience with it and you want to add meaning to it, I won't say no. But I also am just kind of like, it's really just another thing,
Right.
for people to experience.
Yeah.
And I think they're cool, and I like the pictures for sure. That come out of it.
For sure.
But anyway, Jason, I wanted to talk today about a topic that is near and dear to my heart.
Oh, yes.
That causes mass confusion for a lot of my couples and for people who are planning in general. Feedback that I hear a lot, and that is the difference between a venue coordinator and a planner, or even a planner and a day of coordinator. There are a lot of terms out there, and the thing about any industry, it will have its own like set of random jargon, right? Like words that we all know what they mean on the inside, but nobody else knows what they mean on the outside. And when you're coming into it, wedding planning should not include like learning a new language, but it sort of does, because you have to know what you're dealing with, and no one's necessarily being 100% crystal clear. And some things are just kind of like, like you get to the space where like you might understand something so well that you don't realize that other people still don't, or don't have that information readily accessible. So that's what I wanted to dive into today. And I get a lot of feedback from couples. Like I had a couple that booked me that their venue had told them that they had a planner. And the couple was like, yeah, but then we were asking for stuff and everything was kind of like, no, we don't do that. Or, here's a preferred vendor list, but we don't handle X, Y, and Z. And so then they started reaching out, obviously, because they were like, well, we know we need help, but we're not really sure where that help would come from. And so I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about it, because I feel like there's this misinformation that's out there about what a venue coordinator does for the day versus what an outside source will do. And the biggest thing that I feel needs to be confirmed is that the venue coordinator is there for the venue. An outside planner or even a day of coordinator that you hire is there for the couple. They are there for the person who hired them. And so those are the biggest distinction that you can make. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? That doesn't mean that the venue coordinators don't have a role that is quite important. And so if your venue does have one, it's a definitely a nice to have. It's just not necessarily a replacement for what you would get with an actual planner on the outside. And so one of the things that to keep in mind is if your venue is telling you that you have a coordinator, that's great, and it's a very important thing. They're going to make sure that everything is set up and ready to go at your venue. Some of them are really, really helpful and will ensure that like your signage is up, and they might even do like, escort cards and kind of light setup, but they are attached to the venue. So if it is happening at the venue, they might need to get involved, but they're not creating a timeline for you. They're not doing a lot of other stuff for you. What's your experience, Jason?
So first, I want to just tell you that I think you're correct. The wedding industry has a lot of jargon in each of the individual vendor categories, and that's something that, if you're a listener and you're planning your wedding, yeah, it's going to be difficult to kind of learn the new language, as Martine said, because each category has different names within it, and then those things might be different from vendor to vendor. I know, just to give a brief example, with wedding videography, the product that I sell, I call a highlight film. Sometimes people call that a trailer. Sometimes people call that a short film, right? So there's so many different names for the same 5-minute wedding film video thing that I produce. And so, yeah, we're filled with so many different acronyms and jargon and inside terminology, number one. Number two, I think that what you're talking about, Martine, is, you mentioned the planner, you mentioned the day of coordinator, and you mentioned the in-house venue wedding coordinator. And what really I think is important to kind of set up for the audience who's listening is to understand that they are 3 different products.
Right.
They have different goals. Each one of those 3 people has a different mission that they're coming to you from, or serving you with a different base, a different set of ground rules. So I think it's just important to kind of make the distinction. I'll even throw in another sort of mix. I know that I've been at venues, since we're talking about venue coordinators, sometimes there will even be a person who they might tell you, yeah, we'll give you a bridal assistant for the day.
Bridal attendant or a bridal assistant.
Right, attendant or assistant. And a lot of times couples think that person is going to be their wedding planner. And that person's job, as I've observed it, is literally just to follow the bride around, or one of the 2 people getting married, follow them around, give them water, wipe their brow if they're sweating, bustle their dress,
yep,
and bring them food.
Right.
And not that that's a bad service, because I wish somebody would do that for me, but it's certainly not even a venue coordinator or a wedding coordinator at a venue. So
correct. So bridal attendants also. All of these folks have their jobs and their assignments for the day. A lot of them are nice to haves. They don't replace each other. And to that point, I think, Jason, just trying to define the terminology for everybody so that people aren't just kind of sitting out here being like, but my venue said I had one, and so I don't need one, which is fine, right? There are some people who don't want a wedding planner, and maybe you don't need one, right? That's a decision that you can make, but don't base it off of lack of information. Right? You should have the information in front of you so that you're sure of what you're getting. And that's really what I wanted to clear up today, was just with all the confusion, everybody's going to make the decision that's best for them, right? Do you want the assistance of full service planning, right? Do you want somebody who's giving you all the recommendations so that you don't have to filter out through things yourself, including and even up to finding your venue location, right? That's one. Do you want to make sure that all communications go through one single point, one single source, which would also be a planner's job, right? As opposed to, a day of coordinator, which you might find where you've done all the planning, if you will, but they're coming in to make sure that you are um, cleaning, like, basically that they can manage the day for you. But to manage the day for you appropriately, they have to have all the information, which means even though some people will say day of, it's never truly the kind of thing that you can just come in on the day of and do, right? Versus even like a decorator. So somebody who's coming in to just set up all of your stuff. So maybe you started with a DIY principle and now you've got all this stuff and you have no idea who's going to have time to actually set it up for you. Right. So then you have like, that aspect of it where like we're talking about decorators. So there's so many things, but the biggest one that I really wanted to call out today was the difference between a planner and a venue coordinator, only because I've heard it so many times where people are like, well, my venue has said that they've got a coordinator, and then couples are disappointed by what that actually means for them, and just noting down for yourself that means that the venue has somebody on site who's going to make sure that the venue doesn't end up with egg on their face, right? So that the venue is making themselves look good to you and the guests, right? Because they want to make sure that the venue looks good and is in kind of tip-top shape. So they are there to assist. They are there to make sure that, like, for example, something has spilled and we need it cleaned up. They're on the radio calling somebody to make sure that that's handled. The guests are asking for X, Y, and Z. They're making sure that that's handled. Maybe things are running late and they need to adjust the schedule with the kitchen. They may be on hand to adjust those kinds of things. But what they're not going to do is the job a planner is doing, which is ensuring that all of your vendors from start to finish are on the same page, that they all have the timeline and the floor plan, that they all are marching to the beat of the same drummer, right? They're taking care of the venue, and by default, some of that is taking care of you, but it is not, in essence, planning the wedding for you. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, essentially, that wedding venue coordinator has the venue's interest at heart, whereas the planner and the wedding day coordinator is more aimed at at serving you.
Exactly.
So now let's talk about the main differences between the two, the full service planner, and I know you've kind of been addressing a lot of those points, but let's talk about the main differences between the planner and the coordinator. And just so we're clear, I'm using those terms. When I say planner, I mean full service planner who's with you from the very beginning or right near the very beginning, whereas the coordinator or wedding coordinator or day of coordinator is serving you maybe 30 to 45 days out.
Right. So, and timing wise, when I've done this, Jason, like I always started way before the 45-day mark. So usually 2 to 3 months out, depending on what the couple needs. But essentially my job starts with collecting all of the information that you have already laid out as a coordinator, right? As a planner, I would have already had all of this information. But if you're hiring a coordinator, that assumes that you've done most of the planning yourself, right? That you found all of your vendors, you've signed all of the contracts, you've been the main source of information, and the vendors know you as the point of contact. In order for you to be able to relax and enjoy your day fully, you kind of have to transfer that power over to somebody else. And that's where the coordinator comes in. Whatever language you're using instead of day of, month of, or just even the term coordinator, not the venue coordinator, but, again, the outside coordinator that we're talking about right now, that assumes that you've got to give them all the information that's in your head about what this day looks like. And I help you do that, right? We've got docs and we've got forms, but a big part of it is also making sure that your other vendors know that you've hired a coordinator and that they are there to do the job you've asked them to do, which is manage the day so that you don't have to be the point person for questions on the day of your wedding. Because that's what's going to happen, right? Like, and if you think about it, it's logical, right? If I only know Jason, when I have questions about what's supposed to happen next or what's supposed to go on for this day, or we've got a problem that we've got to solve on the back end, if Jason is my client and Jason is the one who has hired me, I have to get those answers from Jason, right? There's nobody else to do that. And that's it gets a little bit much on the day of your wedding if you're trying to relax and be present and enjoy, that you now have to also be the person who's answering all of these questions on the back end that you probably thought you had answered all of, right? Like you probably thought why didn't we ask these questions earlier, and what else happened? But there are things that a wedding is a living thing, right? And so there are moving parts, and you can never, ever, ever answer all of the questions or solve all of the problems before the wedding day. And so just definitely making sure that you are transitioning from planning to coordinating. Biggest piece of advice that I usually give people is make sure you're making it clear to your other vendors that you have hired a coordinator to do and be that point person for you, and you've given her all or him all of the information to do so. And when they still come to you after the fact and ask you a question, that is your job as the couple to navigate them towards your coordinator. Because if you keep answering all of the questions after you've done the handoff, that's what's going to happen on wedding day. And there's no way to prevent that after the fact, right? Like if you responded to all the questions and all the inquiries and all the emails and didn't transition from planning to I've got a coordinator who's handling this for me, that's exactly what's going to happen on the day of. Now, the difference between that and full service planning is that, again, I would have already been in contact with all of them. I would have already been the point person and the one in charge of all the comms. And so they wouldn't have been coming to you. And in fact, like typically when I've got full service planning, everything gets filtered through me. And I am the go-between between the client and all of the other vendors, which makes it a lot easier because I've got all the answers, right? And so when people do need information or responses to things, then I can help them much more easily because it's not a piece of information I wasn't given. It's not a miscommunication. It's all details that I would possess and be able to assist them much more easily.
I know that as a videographer, just with respect, I've been getting a lot of month of coordinators, or to use that term, coordinator. I don't know how many days or months they've been working, but they're not the full service planner.
Right.
And so I will, as of late, I've been receiving like emails from these folks just kind of introducing themselves and saying, hey, my name is so-and-so. I am the month of coordinator for, this person and that person, this couple. I'm looking forward to working with you. And at that point, I begin interacting with them almost exclusively, except for my part of my brand is to meet, on Zoom calls with my clients. But right. But in terms of talking about timeline and the day and anything that I might need to help things run smoother, I'm usually dealing with that person, not the couple.
Which honestly, Jason, is such a beautiful thing, and I'm happy to hear you say it. But it's not most vendors, right? Like that's the reality. Most vendors don't do that. Most vendors might take the timeline, they may review it, they may sign off on it, and then afterwards, their part of their process might be, for example, to have a last minute meeting. So for example, this might come up with the photo video team or even the DJ. Typically all of those will come up, sometimes even hair and makeup, right? All the people who are going to be there on the day of, where they have a last minute meeting with a last meeting with the client that potentially came out after they've received the timeline and signed off on it. And they don't necessarily include the coordinator on that conversation because either they're expecting the client to do that themselves, or they're kind of assuming that like we don't really need this, right? Like I'm talking to my client as I would normally do because that is part of your process, right? Which makes sense. Totally understand that. Problem is that information also often gets disseminated during this meeting, and if your coordinator is not included on that call or in that meeting or in that communication, details get missed. I've had complete changes to timelines happen during those meetings where a photographer was supposed to start at noon, but now the client has decided they want him to start at 8 a.m. I've had changes of location happen.
That's a major difference.
Yeah.
From noon to 8 a.m.
Exactly. And so, I've had changes of location happen during those last meetings. where, client decided that they were going to get ready someplace else because the photographer thought the pictures would be better, but like no one told me. Or like I've had changes to the song, or the order in which we are introducing materials. I've had MCs decide that we're not doing a public cake cutting after all, and they had that conversation with the client. Things that like, as a coordinator, that makes it a whole lot harder for me to manage on the day of if everybody's like, no, that's not what we discussed. And I'm like, but it's right here on the paper that you signed off of. And they're like, meh, cares about the paper. I'm just trying to make my client happy. And I get that totally, 100%. That's the goal, right? That's the goal for all of us. But it often just gets a little bit messy when there are details missing. From what I know or what I understood about what was going on versus what the client knew or what the client told you directly, and that didn't get translated.
Yeah, that's gotta be incredibly frustrating. I will tell you that after the timeline is set and I've made my revisions or whatever, and I usually don't, but sometimes I'll have a request or something. I still do have a final meeting with my client. And sometimes we'll review like the set thing, and
Right.
I won't make any changes to it, or I won't propose any changes because I've already agreed to everything.
Right.
But I will admit there's one thing that I sometimes do advocate for, and it doesn't really impact what you're doing unless there's a specific reason. But I've never had it happen. Is where the toast giver is going to stand.
Right.
So it's not the timing or the song that's played. It's where's the best man and maid of honor speaking from. And I usually want them to be away from the couple, like not at their side, but rather in front of them or somewhere not near them. So
Right.
I'm usually advocating for that earlier in the process, like maybe 2 months out, just kind of letting them know, hey, this looks better on film. Maybe we can try that. But of course, they're not thinking about that then.
Right.
They're 2 months out, but now we're like 3 weeks out, and I'm reminding them, hey, this would look really great on film, and I know, the speeches are at 8 o'clock, so let's try to make sure that we set up the mic on the other side of the room or whatever. But that's the only change.
And I mean, again, that's one of those that I leave to game day decision for our
Right.
our you know what I mean, like for video teams and for photo teams, because of that very reason. Like you might have lights that you've got to set up, and we have to, you know what I mean, like we've got to capture it from a specific angle. I had one couple that did not talk about this, and the team had perfectly lighted him because they assumed he was going to be right in front of the couple, because that's where he was standing the whole time, and they kind of told him this. And then as soon as he was handed the mic, he moved behind the lights. And so there's this moment where like all the team is just kind of flipping lights, trying to like get him like perfectly lit again. And like there was nothing you could do, like he just did it, right? Like it wasn't like there was conversation. But that's an important conversation to have that I don't think people give enough credit to. But that doesn't mess with the timeline, right? Like that's not something that we need to talk about.
I mean, it's a live event.
It's a live event,
and things are going to happen.
Things are going to happen. Things are always going to happen, but at the same time, like it's just a question of like how much information do I have so that I can help you not have to manage it on the day of, right? So the more info that I have, the more details that I have, the more power that you have given me to do so, the easier your day will be, right? So if I don't have the answers and people know that because I've already made a mistake, if you will, on information that you have given them separate of what I knew, then it makes it really hard for them to trust that I've got the details that they need to do their job properly too. Yeah. So just making sure that we have that information kind of balanced out. Mm-hmm. And if you want to skip all of that and not have to worry about what happens, we get the full service planning down.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are so many things that happen on a day of, that sometimes people are planning for months and things don't go as planned, with timeline and things get delayed and stuff like that. So it is a difficult job. I know I know that you have done coordination work, Martine, and I know that your primary goal is to get full service planning. I know that's what you're really aiming for. Both of those jobs, I don't want either one of them.
Well, the good news is I don't want to be a videographer, Jason. So it's a match made in heaven right here.
Yeah. I have trouble managing like my different checkers pieces on the board. Like managing all those pieces. I couldn't imagine managing 15 vendors and a timeline and a couple. It's hard.
It's hard, but we all get through it. So, Jason, it has been a pleasure as always, and I will catch you on the next episode.
Bye, Martine.
Bye.